Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach, mates. Well, round 19 is done and dusted, which means for SuperCoach, it is now finals. So good luck to everyone out there if you are in a elimination final or a qualifying final, and even to those in the bottom half of the ladders. Please don't forget that you have finals as well this week. So you guys can still battle it out for the minor or the non-major premiership for bragging rights. So we're just going to do a little bit of a quick recap of round 19, and we're just going to talk about some players who might be out of our sides. And then I think we're going to do just a bit of a quick preview of next week as well. So I've got both Thomas and Jonas here tonight. Now, unfortunately, I do not have a face camera, so I'm sorry about that. But I'll start off with you, Jonas. How did you go last week? And have you recovered yet from Collingwood's heart attack stuff on Sunday?
Yeah, I scored the 23.64, which moved me up into 9,000. Holding on to Hewitt sort of meant that my rank didn't skyrocket by any means, but either way, it was a half-decent ranking considering I had Kelly on the bench. As for the Collingwood game, yeah, I'm still on the high of that beautiful, poetic victory, and hopefully it continues. But yeah, look, some cracks that are being sort of blanketed in that second and third quarter, so hopefully we can fix them, but time will tell. How'd you go, Tom?
Yeah, pretty good. I think I just scored just over 2,400, which is pretty good. Another green arrow, putting me in the top 4,000 or something like that, 445, I'm pretty sure, which is pretty
good result.
Yeah, take that considering the early horror start I had to the season, but yeah, not too bad. I guess I think I'm playing you, Jonas, in our head-to-head cash leagues. That'd be interesting, and I think a good preview for what's to come in the next coming week. Yeah.
Hopefully we meet again in the granny.
Yeah,
hopefully we do.
That's the way.
Well, I scored 23.45, which I think was the lowest again out of everyone. And I'll quickly just pick a good player and a bad player. So the good player, I think I touched on this guy about in the second round of DPP additions, and I said you must pick up Marcus Bontempelli in your forward line. We didn't do the podcast last week, but he would have been there last week. He scored 320 points in his last 2 weeks. And he right now is just about the form player on SuperCoach. And the dud, well, I'm going to blame myself because I forgot to change the captaincy off Sean Darcy, and he only got 93. So, yeah, that's a little bit disappointing there. But moving on. So, yeah, as I said, so obviously we're around 20 now, so trades are at a premium. So we're just going to quickly touch on some underperforming players and perhaps what we should do with them. So the first one I'm going to start off with is Jaden Short at Richmond, who's now 470,000. His 3-round average is only 90. What would you do with Jaden Short here if you had, say, 4 trades, Thomas? What would you do with Jaden Short?
Definitely trade. Unfortunately, just his midfield time has killed his scoring. He just seems to suffer a lot when it comes to contested footy, as the case was against Freo. He's lost his halfback role to Rioli, and they've kind of liked him in the midfield from an actual footy standpoint, not a SuperCoach standpoint, unfortunately. And yeah, he's scoring. He just doesn't score at all. Like, he's lucky to get to 70, 80 at this point, which, you've got guys like Ware and, even Jace Bergwijn from Port who are scoring almost similarly in the last couple of weeks. So it's a bit unfortunate. I mean, if Hewitt wasn't injured, he'd be a trade out for me, but obviously Hewitt's zero is more concerning, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, he's one that I definitely get rid of. And you've got an abundance of players to choose from. As one that also is, if you're strapped for cash, Aaron Hall, I think you could probably take the punt on. There's 4 weeks left this season. Just hope to God that he doesn't get injured again, because he's, guaranteed a 110 most games, when he's playing. So, yeah, it's a bit concerning that whether we pick him next year or not short, it depends if they decide to play him back in defence or keep him in the midfield. But, yeah, as soon as he got in the midfield, probably that 150 or whatever he scored against West Coast back when he first got in the midfield kind of made us look at him a little bit in a positive light. But, yeah, every game since then has been pretty disappointing, unfortunately.
Yeah. And is this exactly the same words here for Jack Crisp as well, Jonas?
If I was ranking some of the underperforming premiums in like Crisp, Short, Dunkley, and maybe Cripps, Short would definitely be number one trade out target because of his role. Yes, he's durable, similarly to Crisp, but I feel like with Crisp, he still has the ability to score well if he's mixing his time between the midfield and the half back line. Short's primarily playing forward of the ball, and yeah, with that sort of role, he's never going to score over 100 for the last 4 weeks. As for Crisp, he's definitely a luxury trade, and you'd have to be bringing in someone really good, and you'd have to have sufficient funds and trades. Someone like a Tom Stewart, for example, would be a pretty good trade. But if you were tossing it between trading, say, a Crisp and a Short, I'd definitely be leaning towards Short.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think Collingwood they got some big games coming up, and I think Jack Crisp is gonna have to be at his best. So last time they played Melbourne, he got 119. Last time they played Carlton, he got 97. I don't know who Collingwood got Port Adelaide. So yeah, so he played Carlton and Melbourne. He's got pretty much 200s against them last time they played. So I don't know if that's a good omen, but yeah, I think with Collingwood probably playing for a top 4 spot over the next couple of weeks, I think Crisp will want to be at his up around the 100 mark. And obviously, Jonas, you touched on my next player, which is Josh Dunkley, whose 3-round average is only 69.7. I don't think he's ever recovered since that sort of knock in the head he got. What are we doing with Josh Dunkley, Thomas? Because he is still the 3rd ranked overall forward this year, but he's down at 463,000. So I don't sort of know what's around that price for him. But what are you doing with Dunkley, Thomas?
Probably don't have enough trades in 1 week to get rid of him. He's a bit concerning. Not exactly sure what's the reasoning behind his point or lack of point scoring. I don't know if Jonas, you would have maybe clear understanding of why that's happening, but I guess it's a bit of a situation where there's a lot of dog midfielders. Probably Bailey Smith coming back doesn't really help him as well. Gets probably pushed into the half forward line a bit more, and it has been a bit concerning that it's been a bit of a trend for the last couple of weeks, which isn't ideal. Obviously, doesn't help for. Obviously I've got Bontempelli, which is nice, but Bontempelli firing on all cylinders doesn't help his scoring potential as well, just because of the amount of points going through the dog system. And we all knew that was a risk with picking, X amount of dog players. There's only so many points you can give out to players, and it's obviously, one person's going to suffer, and usually is Dunkley, because he gets suffered out of. He suffers because of the lack of rotation going through that midfield, with Liberatore being a full-time mid. So, yeah, he's one that I guess is similar boat to Crisp. He's a luxury trade. We all know what he's capable of. He's capable of pumping out a really good score. But if you dare to trade him, probably Rowan Marshall would be a decent option.
I've got a left field option here.
Yeah,
I've got a left field one.
Yeah, so before Nathan reveals what his option is, I think, Rowan's not a bad option considering Paddy's out for essentially the entire home and away season. Given that the rest of his ruck run's not terrible, he's one to consider at a cheaper price for sure.
Yeah. Have you got anything to add, Jonas, before I reveal my player that I think you should definitely consider?
I think partly Dunkley's scoring can be partly attributed also to his disposal efficiency as well. I think he went above 100 in fantasy or dream team format. So clearly he's getting enough of the ball, but yeah, just not using it well enough. So maybe one where I probably wouldn't trade unless there's a glaringly obvious forward that you don't currently have. I'm not sure I'd be going to Marshall, for instance, because he's also a bit injury prone and a bit speculative. So that's why I'd probably be leaning towards trading one of the underperforming defenders, because you can get in someone like Tom Stewart, who is able to average like 130 from here on out.
Yeah, so I'm in a review of my player now. Now, this is completely left field. I've only just noticed his name. What do you guys think about Tom Papley?
I noticed he was playing a bit of midfield minutes.
And I'll tell you why I like the Tom Papley pick. So, I watched this show called Pure Footy with Daniel Hoyne from Champion Data and David King, and they've highlighted a bit of a role change for Tom Papley in that he is pretty much the Sydney Swans version of Dustin Martin, in that when he gets the ball, I think every second touch, so I think like his average scoreboard impact, I think it's pretty much about 50%. So pretty much what that means is that every time he touches the ball, 1 in 2 of them are turning into a score. So if you can have that high an impact on a game, you're going to score points. Now, Sydney are in pretty much the same boat as Collingwood. They're playing for a top 4 side. Sydney need Tom Papley to keep playing this role that he's been playing for the last pretty much 5 weeks. He's got a 3-round average of 120. He's got a 5-round average of 110. He's 499,000. So if you've got a Dunkley, if you've got someone like that, it's only a 30k jump. And the Sydney Swans draw over the next few weeks. They've got GWS, North Melbourne, Collingwood, and St Kilda. I just think that the role that he's playing, I guess it's a bit like the Harry Himmelberg role. And we all jumped on Harry Himmelberg. And I think now it's time to take notice of this role that Tom Papley's playing and just highlight that he needs to keep playing as well as he is for Sydney to push for a top 4 side. And the other thing I like about him, he's only in 1,089 sides. So if you want a point of difference, he's in form. I think that is the way to go. But if you guys have someone else, then please put it out there.
Like the suggestion, and yeah, he's been in a good vein of form, bit of a pod, so don't hate the pick. The only issue I have is I think Josh Kennedy's yet to return. Where does he play? And also, I know last week Papley had 4 shots and goal, 2 goals, which inflated that score. What happens when he's not kicking goals?
Yeah, well, I mean, he got 80, and he got 84 against Essendon. So that's why I said it's a speculative pick, but at this stage I don't think it really matters. I think you've got to get the informed players, and Sydney have, I think, an easy draw coming home. So he's in form. I think this is a make or break pick. I think he could go gangbusters for 4 weeks, and he could win you a SuperCoach grand final from nowhere, or he could cost you. So there is definitely a risk there, but he's got the form. He's got a fairly easy draw, I would say. Probably Collingwood and maybe St Kilda being the only sort of harder game. So that's who I would lean towards if you're going for a point of difference. But yeah, anyway, do you guys have anyone else you'd like to touch on with regards to performance-wise?
I wouldn't say performance-wise, but one person that I think was caused a few headaches is probably George Hewitt.
Yes.
Yes, Nathan finally brought him in, and I think he's the reason why he's stuffed up everyone's team since.
Yeah, I think I've got about 3 games out of him. I think I've got 3 games out of him. So, George, I'm not happy with you.
Yeah, so obviously with his back concerns, he's had history with back concerns. Missed the 1 week, which a lot of people held, including myself and Jonas and Nathan. So, what are your thoughts on him as a trade out option, or are you going to still hold leading into finals? Or for anyone out there, obviously, that is considering trading or holding, what are your thoughts on obviously that situation? Because it's not a definitive 1 week, they're saying it's kind of week to week basis.
You take this one, Nathan.
Yeah, so I'm in a different boat. So I probably can't afford to trade him given that I've traded him in. So for me, I think I'm just going to have to hold him and hope that he can come back. But his scoring has 13. He's had 3 scores under 100 after not going under 100 for pretty much the whole first half of the year. And it was frustrating every week just watching him get 120s, 115s. And ever since I pulled the trigger on him, he's gone pretty much 3 scores under 100 and 1 scored 123. So, yeah, I think if you started with him, I think you'd almost consider trading him out, personally. Especially if he's not playing again this week. I think you just need every single points you can get. And if he's not named and you started off with him, I think you've just got to bite the bullet and get rid of him. What are you doing, Jonas?
I don't subscribe to the notion that you shouldn't trade a player if you've recently brought them in, because that's sort of almost neglecting just other factors at play. So even if you have recently traded him in, like you did with Heaney, and then they start scoring bad or get injured, you shouldn't hesitate to trade them out and just jump off a sinking ship if you have the trades. I unfortunately don't have enough trades to trade him out, but how many trades do you have, Nathan?
I have 4.
Yeah, so if you don't have much cover, I'd still be looking to move Hewett on because we're unsure about how long this back injury will last. He had this form of injury a few years ago at Sydney, and we also saw what happened with that core cuff. It was a week-by-week basis thing, but went on for 3 weeks, so he could still be out for 1 or 2 more. So I'd still be looking to move him on if you're in like a must-win matchup in a league or you just want to move up your rank. I wouldn't be looking at other factors like how many weeks you've had him.
Yeah, I think for me, if I got rid of him, I think Dawson would be the one that I would go for. He's come down a little bit. So yeah, I think he'd be the one I'd go for.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But yeah, moving on to obviously, as you alluded to, Jonas, league finals coming up. What are your thoughts on obviously with trades being at a premium, as Nathan suggested earlier on? What are your thoughts on obviously holding trades or pulling the trigger depending on what situation? Or would you say hypothetically you've got 4 trades left, 5 trades left? Would you look to hold them if you had a qualifying final, or would you still do as you please and kind of trade and be aggressive still? But what are your thoughts on how many trades you should be looking at and what sort of suggestions would you have dependent on what final you're playing in?
I think the qualifying final isn't that necessary for you to start trading immediately because it's not like in actual AFL where, oh yeah, you can rest these players, let them freshen up. It's completely different here. If you use your last trade or last remaining trades and then something happens the week after on your bye week and then those players continue to miss, you're at a disadvantage. Whereas if you hold your trades, you lose the qualifying final, but then someone gets injured and then you're able to trade them out and then you're stronger the next week for the elimination final and then also the week after because you don't have those injured players. That's obviously clearly a better spot to be in. So, yeah, that's where I sit on the qualifying final. You can trade, but I wouldn't put myself down to 0 trades and expose myself for injuries that may occur in 2 weeks' time should I win the qualifying final. But yeah, as for elimination finals, because they're do or die, and if that's all you're playing for, then clearly try and get the best team possible. But I wouldn't be sidewaysing premiums with 1 or 2 trades left, because say you do get through that 1 week, you're not going to go too much further if 1 or 2 injuries arise.
Yeah, it's fair enough. What are your thoughts on that, Nathan? Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, look, I'm going to 100% agree with that. I'm actually in this boat. I'm actually in the second boat where I think I'm playing all elimination finals. I've got 4 left. I don't want to do another one, but if George Hewitt doesn't get up, then I might have to pull the trigger on that, which is one I don't really want to do.
Yeah.
But if he gets up, it still might end up. The only saving grace is that they do play Adelaide, and I think Carlton. I mean, believe it or not, Carlton is still playing for top 4 spot. I know people will laugh at that, but they're only a game off second place, Carlton. So, I think there's still a lot to shape in that top 8 in the AFL, especially those top 7 sides. I still think any one of those top 7 sides could finish in and out of the top 4. So I think for Carlton to get there, I think they need George Hewitt in the side. So I'm hoping he gets up, and I'm optimistic that he will. But if he doesn't, then I think I'm going to have to pull that trigger and sideways him.
Right. Quick question. So 4 trades, obviously there's 4 weeks. I think 4 trades is ample for such short span of time. So what I did a few weeks ago was I used an extra 2 trades to go down to 2 to get 23 premiums. So my 23rd at the moment is coming, but because Hewitt's not playing, he will come in and fill that role. Do you think it's a better idea to spend an extra 2 trades and say downgrade 2 cashed out rookies, for instance, Ware and maybe a Parnell or whoever else you have, to sort of get like a D7, M9 sort of type who can cover those 1 to 2 week injuries like COVID outs or concussion protocols? Or are you saving those 4 trades for longer term injuries where you can just sideways a player?
Yeah, well, I guess for me, so I have kept hold of Nick Dacos, who is doing that role for me. So I've had to use him on the field, but I'm actually chopping and changing between who to put on the bench out of him, Short, and Crisp. I think his form's too hard to ignore. So I think he might end up on the field, and I think I'm going to end up maybe putting Jaden Short as the loophole and just seeing how he goes. Although Richmond play on the Sunday. So, yeah, I'll probably put Nick Dacos on there and see how he goes. And if D'Ambrosio doesn't get named, then I will take Short off and take Nick Dacos to score depending on how he goes. But yeah, I definitely think that if you're in that position, I think it probably almost is worth getting. I know Patrick Dangerfield was a name that got thrown around a few weeks ago as being that potential player, and I actually don't know how he's gone the last few weeks, Dangerfield.
No.
He went down. So, yeah, so I think if you can manufacture that, I think that would be the way I would go. But I don't think I would be wasting a trade to get in a D7 or an FM9. I think you've got to already have that player in your side. What do you think about that, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same situation as you. Got 4 trades and got Hewitt. I'd probably look towards trading him at this point. Personally, I think we'll touch on rookies in a minute, but like I'm in a slightly different position where I'm strapped for cash, so I literally don't have much wriggle room. But I mean, potentially bringing Jai Cully in and then upgrading him to Stewart and having, say, how much money it is, 100k or roundabouts for 2 trades is not too bad. I think you got to remember, if you've got 3+ trades going into these last couple of rounds. It's a fair bit. That's, got 4 trades. You got 1 per round essentially, which is what everyone wants in a regular season where you could just trade one once a week. But yeah, it's a tough one. But I think I'm just leaning towards trading him rather than holding him. I guess we can discuss when it comes to VCs and Cs when they're playing or whatever, whether you've got an option to kind of hold and see how your bench cover goes. But yeah, Hewitt's injury concerns, my gut feel says he might not get up next week, and it kind of lingers on a little bit. And even before that, he wasn't scoring through the roof like he was early in the season. But yeah, it's a tricky one. But I think if you've got more than 3 trades, I'd be looking to bump him on.
Yeah. Have you guys got anyone else you'd like?
No, I think we'll probably move on to actually, before we move on to VCs and C, just a quick one. So obviously rookies are there's not many between them nowadays because we've obviously got all premiums and not many not much upgrading to do, obviously. But what are your thoughts on the rookies on the bubble this week? Is anyone that tickles your fancy? Obviously, we're pointing towards Jai Culley, who's seemingly dominated since he's come into that West Coast lineup. Doesn't look like he's going out of that lineup anytime soon. But what are your thoughts on him or anyone else that might be on the bubble this week as potential, using that money to kind of facilitate a trade or even cover if need be? Because obviously those guys are quite cheap. But what are your thoughts on that, Jonas?
Yeah, if I had to list some of them, Culley would definitely be at the top of the pecking order because West Coast need to play these younger players. They're not contending for finals, and I believe he had the most CBAs out of any West Coast player, so that's clearly a sign of trust. Otherwise, I don't mind Hollands, although his job security is maybe a bit shakier. Having said that, he did kick a few goals, and I believe Ballard's injured, who isn't a like-for-like, but obviously that does his job security a bit of help. And other than that, there aren't too many basement picks that really look too appealing. If you wanted someone consistent, maybe in the back line who's a bit more expensive, dare I say it, Rory Thompson, if he gets named, could be one that may play out the rest of the year if Ballard's clearly injured, but if Ballard and Thompson do a like-for-like switch. Otherwise, there aren't too many others that I've noticed, but have there been some I've missed, Nathan?
No, I think they're the two, Culley and Elijah Hollands. I think they're probably the two. If you've got to go down the downgrade path, I think they're the two you probably should look at. I think Culley's a must-have.
In saying that, Ash Johnson could be okay. He's on the bubble. I'm not sure how much more he plays, but he's kicked 5 goals in the last 2 games, so his job security seems to be good for the short term, at least for maybe the next two or so games.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
But I think Culley you've got to get if you're downgrading, and then I think Hollands, if you still got the trades next week, I think he might be worthwhile. But I think I'd be happy to bypass on Hollands, but I think Culley, if you've got trades left, I think you should just get him. He's 102k, he's averaging 83, so I don't think he's going to get dropped anytime soon.
Yeah, I think more importantly, just for cover. Like obviously everyone's saying that, you can get guys like we were talking about Taranto and Dangerfield as potential cover, but I think Danger's gone completely off shit creek with scores of 30 and whatever, and Taranto's pretty hot and cold, for example, in those blokes at the 450k mark or whatever is cheaper kind of, M9s and Culley's an option that has scored 93 and 70 odd in his last 2 games, and he's just one that will play. But more importantly, he's a basement rookie price. But it's really up to what you're looking for in your team at the moment in this kind of point in the season. But moving on now, before we wrap up tonight, obviously VCs and Cs are ultra important, more so than any today, any in the season, because you want to get these right going into finals with a lot of teams being quite similar. But what are your thoughts on early on before you get the team's name tomorrow night? What are your thoughts on a VC and C option? Either of you?
I'm not liking anyone from Friday night's game. And the only few on Saturday that I like the look of is maybe Jack Steele if he doesn't cop the McGuinness attention. Otherwise, potentially Rory Led, although he does have a somewhat tricky matchup in Carlton. And if you're a Sam Walsh owner, potentially that as well. However, he's coming off a bit of an injury scare, so it might be a bit worse for wear. And then, any Sunday options that you like the look of, Nathan?
Yeah, so I've skipped the Friday night game as well. At this stage, I've got the vice captain on Luke Parker. Because last time they played the Giants, I think he got 167. I think he kicked 5 goals or 6 goals or whatever it was, and had like 30 disposals. So he just dominated. But yeah, I am probably gonna end up going with Parker, but I don't mind Jack Steele either. And the captaincy, I think it's hard to ignore the form of Touk Miller. And the fact that they're playing West Coast as well. Last time he played West Coast, he scored 137, and that was in Perth as well. And we know that the Gold Coast Suns are a better side at Metricon. So I think that's probably the way I'm going to lean towards. What are you doing, Thomas?
Yeah, I would have said Touk Miller if it makes it any easier with trying to find loopholes. But yeah, if I can find one between him and Merritt, probably is the captaincy I'll land upon, just because they play North and they've obviously had this COVID issue over the last couple of days. So who knows what will happen until now, but it doesn't seem like there's been any more news on that front. So we'll
find out tomorrow.
Yeah,
the team selection.
We'll see how many people have been affected by that, but he could run rampant if that's the case, just because of his good form. As you said, Touk Miller against West Coast is a solid option.
Any chance of Kane Turner coming back in?
I hope not. He's a serial pest that ruins the best players in opposition teams. But it's a tough one. Probably, I'd say Rory Laird. I mean, he's just been so consistent. I thought he was going to do, not mediocre, but probably score like 120 against Sydney, and he still managed to score 140. So against the Blues, he could actually do pretty well. We'd know Hewitt there.
Lockie Neal.
Oh yeah, Lockie Neal. He's another option. You brought up a good point against Richmond, who absolutely leaked points for fun. So I guess if you probably wouldn't, if you had the likes of Neal and Merritt, you probably wouldn't VC and see that just because there'd be lack of options there. But I guess if you don't have Merritt or anyone else, Neal is a very good option actually. Now you bring it up, considering that Richmond refused to tag, and so do like those sort of teams. Obviously, those opposition players usually get outdone pretty well, but you had to look at last week. I mean, the Tigers played Freo and Brayshaw and Brodie, started on a house on fire, and they completely hit a brick wall. So, I mean, I don't think that's the case with Brisbane, just because they seem to do pretty well across 4 quarters, and it's been, history shows that Brayshaw and Brodie have done it before, where they just completely fall off the cliff with their scoring. But yeah, it'd be an interesting one for sure.
Can I just before we wrap up, can I just quickly touch on Rory Laird? So Rory Laird's actually the 8th highest ranked midfielder this year, and he's only played 16 games. So, he's the 2nd highest averaging midfielder. Only Oliver's ahead of him, and pretty much the only players ahead of him have all played 18 games except for Clayton Oliver. So, he's now gone ahead of Brayshaw and Petrarco and Bontempelli and Dawson. He's now ahead of all of them, and he's only played 16 games. So, I think that's just a sign of how good a year he's had. I'm still devastated that he got picked up a lot heavily through the middle of the year. because he'd be a great point of difference right now.
Oh yeah, 100%. But I think we'll wrap it up there, and yeah, good luck for everyone that's playing their league finals, whether it be your qualifying or elimination or cash leagues. Yeah, hopefully you don't make the wrong VC and C choices, and hopefully beat your opponent across the line. And we'll be back hopefully next week to see who's beaten at the grudge match between me and Jonas. And until then,
Yes.
we'll catch you then.
The grudge match.